Thanks again. Good afternoon. Uh, we've been working on understanding how coral reef restoration affects wave attenuation on shallow reefs. And this project that I'm going to talk about today is part of the Mission Iconics Reefs effort with many folks involved in the field and on land. But in particular, I'd like to acknowledge Andy Bruckner, Jason Sabadaro, and Shay Veman. And support for this work has come from a number of places: the National Marine Sanctuaries Foundation, Honda, NSF, and NOAA. Let me start with a little bit of context. On many tropical coasts, coral reefs are the primary form of coastal defense and significantly reduce wave energy that would otherwise impact shorelines. However, reefs' capacity to provide shoreline protection is being reduced to a range of local and global stressors and disturbances. And declines in living coral and reef structures translate to reduced reef elevation and hydrodynamic roughness, which has the potential to reduce wave dissipation, reduce wave breaking, and decrease friction, and consequently more wave energy and wave forces and inundation at the shoreline. Now, from a hydrodynamic standpoint, flow over coral reefs remains a very challenging problem. These systems tend to be drag dominated due to large-scale bottom roughness. However, the dynamics of wavy flows over multi-scale topography are not well understood, and there's currently no method of computing friction factors for waves or drag coefficients for currents a priori from multi-scale topographic properties. For example, drag coefficients and wave friction factors can vary over a couple of orders of magnitude from reef to reef. So progress on this is going to require further developments in theory, modeling studies, and dedicated field measurements. So this has helped motivate a new study of the effects of restoration on wave attenuation at eastern dry rocks in the Florida Keys, which is undergoing a large-scale restoration effort as part of Mission Iconic Reefs. In concert with the restoration, we're making detailed physical oceanographic measurements to look at these effects. And the goals include quantifying the hydrodynamics, measuring the hydrodynamic forcing that the restoration will be exposed to, including disturbance events, relating the substrate geometry to drag, and using the data to calibrate and verify our models. Our experimental design is based on a first principles approach using conservation of wave energy flux, where wave energy along the direction of wave propagation changes due to dissipation from a combination of wave breaking, bottom friction, and drag from coral protruding up above the substrate. Now, if a reef is restored, we would expect additional bottom roughness would provide an additional avenue for wave attenuation, and this is what we'd like to quantify. So to get at these mechanisms, we've been working alongside the coral restoration practitioners on a set of cross-reef transects at eastern dry rocks. We deployed an array of physical oceanographic sensors at 14 sites along 2 transects, one on restored reef and one on a control reef parallel to it. And these transects span the 4-reef slope, reef crest, and reef flat. And this also span the wave shoaling and wave breaking zones. The array is designed to provide the data required to quantify the wave attenuation across the reef and also to discern between wave dissipation due to wave breaking and dissipation due to bottom drag. The sensors were initially deployed in August 2021 and provide continuous time series of waves, currents, water levels, and water temperature data. And we're planning to do that over the next couple of years. The field data will be used to quantify the wave attenuation as a time series, and so we can look at different forcing conditions and as the restoration proceeds and different potentially disturbant effects affect the reef substrate. We're still working up the data, as you can imagine, but just as a quick look at it, this is 3 weeks of data looking at the change in the wave energy flux at the forereef, the reef crest, and the back reef. And you can see as the waves arrive at the forereef, as we move shoreward, the waves are attenuated, particularly during the large wave events. And in parallel with the field work, we're also doing using the field data to provide verification and boundary conditions for our modeling efforts to hindcast what happened on the reef and predict future reef restoration conditions on the reef. Since the restoration is a work in progress, We can, in the meantime, simulate the effects of what that restoration would do in the future if those corals grow to a specified height at a specified spatial density. We've put together a 1D model and done some preliminary runs along the same reef transects that we're collecting the field data on. And you can see in the figure here, the green indicates the restoration region in the model. We can, of course, play with where that is and how big it is. And then inside the model, then we can compute the contributions of the different mechanisms for dissipating the wave energy. Another thing that's nice about this approach is that we can circle back to the practitioners and give some advice on where and when, or where and how dense different restoration efforts and what that would translate into wave attenuation consequences. So I'm almost out of time, but just for our next steps, we're planning on to continue with our field measurements. The analysis is ongoing, and of course the modeling is going to be able to take us far beyond what the field data can do for us. And finally, if I could, let me close with a plug for a postdoc opening in my lab to work on this stuff. Please reach out to me or Shay Veman if you're interested, or if you know someone who'd like to nerd out with us. So thanks.